Detective Lisa Chen had been having a good day. She'd just finished a wonderful Sunday lunch with her mother, helping the elderly woman reorganize her kitchen cabinets and sharing stories about work. Well, some stories anyway. Her mother didn't need to know about the darker side of police work that Lisa dealt with every day in internal affairs. The afternoon sun felt warm on her face as she drove through the tree-lined streets of Oakwood Heights, one of the city's more affluent neighborhoods. Lisa had rolled down her windows, enjoying the fresh air and the peaceful quiet that was so different from the busy police station where she spent most of her time. She was dressed casually in dark jeans and a comfortable gray hoodie, looking like any other person enjoying a relaxing weekend. Her phone buzzed with a text from her partner at work, reminding her about an early meeting on Monday. Lisa smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring another day of investigating complaints against fellow officers. It wasn't the most popular job in the department, but someone had to do it. After 15 years on the force, she'd seen enough to know that accountability mattered more than popularity. As she stopped at a red light, Lisa noticed a patrol car in her rearview mirror. The officer behind the wheel seemed to be studying her vehicle intently. She thought nothing of it at first. Police officers were trained to be observant, and it was natural to notice other drivers. But as the light turned green and she continued driving, the patrol car stayed close behind her. Lisa checked her speedometer. She was driving exactly at the speed limit. She signaled properly at every turn and came to complete stops at stop signs. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her driving, yet the patrol car continued to follow her. She could see the officer in her mirror, and something about his posture made her uncomfortable. Officer Brad Thompson had been patrolling this neighborhood for 3 years, and he thought he knew who belonged here and who didn't. When he spotted the dark sedan with tinted windows driving slowly through the streets, his suspicions were immediately raised. The driver appeared to be a young woman, but something about the situation didn't sit right with him. Thompson had built his reputation on what he called good instincts, though others might have called it something else entirely. He prided himself on keeping the neighborhood safe, which in his mind meant keeping certain types of people out. The chief had praised him just last month for his proactive policing, and Thompson took that as encouragement to continue his methods. He ran the license plate through his system. The car came back clean, registered to someone with no criminal history, but that didn't change his gut feeling. In his experience, trouble could come in any package, and he wasn't about to let anything slide on his watch. Lisa noticed the patrol car's lights weren't on, but the officer was clearly following her with purpose. She turned right at the next intersection, testing her theory. Sure enough, the patrol car turned right as well. She made another turn and again the car followed. Her heart began to beat a little faster. As a police officer herself, she knew what this looked like. She was being followed, and soon she would probably be pulled over. She reached for her phone, quickly sending a text to her partner. Being followed by patrol car in Oakwood Heights. We'll keep you posted. It was a precaution she'd learned from years of experience. Always let someone know where you are and what's happening. Thompson finally decided to make his move. He hit his lights and watched as the sedan slowly pulled over to the curb. He called in the stop to dispatch, giving them the location and license plate number. As he walked toward the car, he felt that familiar surge of authority that came with wearing the badge and uniform. Lisa saw the flashing lights in her mirror and sighed deeply. She knew exactly what this was about, and it had nothing to do with her driving. She'd been a victim of this kind of stop before, years ago when she was just starting her career. Back then, she'd been young and inexperienced. Now she was a seasoned detective who knew her rights and knew how these situations could unfold. She pulled over safely, putting the car in park and placing her hands on the steering wheel, where they could be clearly seen. Her service weapon was properly secured in its holster under her hoodie, and her badge and identification were in her wallet in the center console. For now, she would keep that information to herself and see how this played out. Thompson approached the driver's side window, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. The driver was indeed a young black woman, probably in her 30s, wearing casual clothes. She had her hands on the steering wheel and was looking straight ahead, which he took as a sign of nervousness. "Good afternoon," Thompson said, his tone already carrying an edge of suspicion. "License and registration, please." Lisa turned to look at him, keeping her voice calm and professional. "May I ask why you stopped me, officer?" I don't believe I was violating any traffic laws. Thompson's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned, especially not by someone he'd pulled over. I'll ask the questions here. License and registration. Now. The tone of his voice told Lisa everything she needed to know about what kind of officer she was dealing with. She'd investigated dozens of complaints against officers just like him. She reached slowly for her purse, making sure her movements were deliberate and visible. I'm reaching for my wallet, she said clearly, knowing that clear communication could prevent misunderstandings. She pulled out her driver's license but left her police identification hidden for now. Thompson took the license and looked at it carefully. Lisa Williams. The address was on the other side of town, in a neighborhood he considered less desirable. What are you doing in this area, Miss Williams? Lisa kept her voice steady. I was visiting family. Am I not allowed to drive through this neighborhood? That depends, Thompson replied, walking back to his patrol car to run her information. The license came back clean. No warrants, no criminal history. But Thompson wasn't satisfied. In his mind, clean records didn't mean much. Plenty of criminals had never been caught. He returned to Lisa's window, still holding her license. Step out of the vehicle, please. Lisa felt her heart rate increase. This was escalating beyond a simple traffic stop, and she knew it. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Why do you need me to get out of the car? Thompson's hand moved to his radio. I said step out of the vehicle. Don't make me ask again. Lisa knew she had a choice to make. She could reveal her identity now and likely end this confrontation immediately. But she also knew that what was happening to her happened to countless other people who didn't have a badge to protect them. She decided to see how far this officer would go, gathering evidence of his behavior that might help others in the future. She slowly opened her car door and stepped out, her hands visible at all times. The afternoon sun seemed too bright now, and she was acutely aware of the houses around them, wondering if anyone was watching this scene unfold. Thompson looked her up and down, his expression making it clear what he thought of her. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. Lisa complied, her mind racing. She was being treated like a criminal for no reason other than driving while black in an affluent neighborhood. As an internal affairs detective, she'd heard similar stories hundreds of times. Now she was living one herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. Tomorrow she'd be back at her desk, investigating complaints against officers who behaved exactly like the one standing behind her right now. But today she was just another citizen whose rights were being violated by someone who had sworn to protect and serve all people equally. Little did Officer Thompson know that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his career, officer. Thompson circled around, Lisa like a predator studying its prey. The power dynamic was clear, and he was enjoying every moment of it. Lisa stood with her hands flat against her car, feeling the warm metal under her palms as she tried to stay calm. She'd been in situations like this before, but never as the person being searched. So Lisa Williams, Thompson said, drawing out her name like it left a bad taste in his mouth. What's your real story? What are you really doing in this neighborhood? Lisa kept her voice level, though inside she was burning with anger. I told you, officer. I was visiting my mother. She lives about 10 minutes from here. Thompson laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. And I suppose you just happened to be driving real slow, looking at all these nice houses, checking out what you might want to come back for later? The accusation hit Lisa like a slap. This officer was suggesting she was planning to commit burglary, all because she was a black woman in an upscale neighborhood. She turned her head slightly to look at him. That's a serious accusation, officer. Do you have any evidence to support it? Don't turn around, Thompson snapped. Keep your eyes forward and your mouth shut unless I ask you a direct question. Lisa faced forward again, her jaw clenched tight. As an internal affairs detective, she'd seen this behavior in complaint after complaint. Officers who let their prejudices guide their actions, who saw criminals instead of citizens. She'd always wondered what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Now she knew. And it was worse than she'd imagined. Thompson began patting her down, his search more aggressive than necessary. He was clearly trying to intimidate her, and Lisa had to use all her training to stay calm. She knew that any sudden movement or strong reaction could give him an excuse to escalate things further. Well, well, Thompson said as his hands found the outline of her concealed weapon. What do we have here? Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Her service weapon was properly holstered and legal. but she knew this discovery would change everything. "I have a concealed carry permit, officer. The weapon is legally owned and properly secured." Thompson's eyes lit up with excitement. This was exactly what he'd been hoping to find. A gun in this neighborhood? That's interesting. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 247. I'm going to need backup at my location. Suspect is armed." "I'm not a suspect," Lisa said firmly. "I have a legal permit to carry that weapon." "We'll see about that," Thompson replied. "Keep your hands on the vehicle and don't move." Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived on the scene. Lisa watched in her side mirror as 4 additional officers got out and approached. She recognized one of them, Officer Jenkins, who she'd worked with on a case the previous year. But Jenkins didn't seem to recognize her, probably because she was out of uniform and in a completely different context. Thompson was clearly enjoying the attention. "Found this one cruising the neighborhood real slow," he announced to his colleagues. "She's armed, claims to have a permit, but you know how these stories go." Lisa felt her face burn with shame and anger. The way Thompson talked about her, like she wasn't even a person worthy of basic respect, was infuriating. But she knew that showing her anger would only make things worse. One of the backup officers, a younger man who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, stepped forward. "What's the probable cause for the search, Thompson?" Thompson glared at his colleague. "Suspicious behavior. Wrong neighborhood. Armed and dangerous." He turned back to Lisa. "Empty your pockets, everything, now." Lisa complied, pulling out her keys, some cash, and her phone. She left her wallet in the car, still keeping her police identification hidden. She wanted to see how far this would go, how badly these officers would behave when they thought no one was watching. "Check the car," Thompson ordered one of his backup officers. "Let's see what else she's hiding." "Do you have a warrant to search my vehicle?" Lisa asked. Thompson stepped closer to her, close enough that she could smell his coffee breath. "I don't need a warrant." "I have probable cause. Armed suspect in a high-crime area." "This isn't a high-crime area," Lisa pointed out. "You said yourself this is a nice neighborhood." Thompson's face reddened. "Don't get smart with me. You know exactly what I mean." Lisa did know what he meant, and it made her sick. In Thompson's mind, her presence alone made this a high-crime situation. Her very existence in this neighborhood was suspicious enough to justify a search. As the officers went through her car, Lisa noticed that people were starting to watch from their houses. A few had come out onto their porches, and she could see phones being held up. They were recording. Part of her was grateful for the witnesses, but another part was humiliated to be treated this way in public. Thompson noticed the audience too, and it seemed to energize him rather than concern him. "Nothing to see here, folks," he called out. "Just keeping your neighborhood safe." An elderly white woman from across the street walked over. "Officer, is everything all right?" "What did she do?" Thompson nodded at her respectfully, his tone completely different from how he'd been speaking to Lisa. "Just a routine check, ma'am. Found her acting suspicious and she's armed. We're just making sure everything's on the up and up." The woman looked at Lisa with a mixture of fear and disgust. "Well, thank goodness you stopped her. We've had some break-ins lately and you never know." Lisa wanted to scream. These people were talking about her like she was already guilty of something, like her mere presence was evidence of criminal intent. She thought about all the cases she'd investigated, all the complaints from people who'd been treated exactly like this. Now she understood their anger and frustration in a way she never had before. "Car's clean," one of the backup officers reported. "Nothing suspicious." Thompson looked disappointed. "Check again. Look under the seats, in the glove compartment. People like this are good at hiding things. People like this." The words echoed in Lisa's mind. She'd heard that phrase in dozens of complaint interviews. It was code, a way for prejudiced officers to express their biases without saying exactly what they meant. The younger officer who'd asked about probable cause looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Thompson, maybe we should what?" Thompson cut him off. "Should let her go because you're feeling sorry for her? This is how neighborhoods get overrun. You give them an inch, they take a mile." Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, trying to maintain her composure. Thompson wasn't even trying to hide his prejudice anymore. He was saying things that would be clear evidence of bias in any internal investigation. "Found her permit," one of the officers called out, holding up the paperwork from her glove compartment. "It's valid. Weapons legally owned." Thompson snatched the permit and studied it carefully, clearly hoping to find some problem with it. Permit's good, he admitted grudgingly. But that doesn't mean she's not up to something. The crowd of neighbors had grown larger. Lisa could see phones everywhere recording every moment of her humiliation. She knew that by evening this video would probably be online, another example of racial profiling that would spark outrage and debate. But she also knew something that Thompson didn't. She wasn't just another victim of police misconduct. She was a detective with the power to do something about it, and every word Thompson had spoken, every action he'd taken was building a case against him that would be impossible to defend. Thompson handed her permit back with obvious reluctance. "You're lucky this checks out," he said. "But I'm watching you. I see you in this neighborhood again. I'll be keeping a close eye on you." Lisa took the permit, her hand steady despite her anger. "Is that a threat, officer?" "It's a promise," Thompson replied. "Now get out of here before I find a reason to take you downtown." Lisa knew she could end this right now. She could pull out her badge and watch Thompson's world crumble in an instant. But she wasn't ready yet. She wanted to see if he would actually let her go, if he would continue to abuse his power right up until the very end. She walked back to her car, acutely aware of all the eyes on her. The neighbors were whispering among themselves, and she could imagine what they were saying. Another dangerous person removed from their safe neighborhood. Another threat neutralized by their protectors in blue. As she got into her car, Lisa caught the eye of the younger officer who'd seemed uncomfortable. For just a moment, she saw something in his expression that gave her hope. He knew what had just happened wasn't right. Maybe there was still hope for officers like him. But Thompson was a different story entirely. As Lisa started her car and prepared to drive away, she knew that his reckoning was coming. He just didn't know it yet. Lisa sat in her car for a moment, hands trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The adrenaline was coursing through her body, and she needed a second to collect herself. Thompson was standing behind her vehicle, still watching her with that smug expression that made her want to scream. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with anger and humiliation. But underneath all of that there was something else. Determination. She'd seen enough. Thompson had shown his true colors, and now it was time for the consequences. Lisa reached for her wallet in the center console, her fingers finding the familiar weight of her police identification. For 15 years this badge had been her shield and her responsibility. Today it would be Thompson's downfall. Thompson tapped on her window with his knuckle, making her jump slightly. "I said move along," he called through the glass. "Don't make me change my mind about letting you go." Lisa rolled down her window and looked up at him. "Actually, officer, there's something I need to show you." Thompson frowned, suspicious. "What now? You got some sob story about why you were really here?" "Not exactly," Lisa said calmly. She opened her wallet and pulled out her police identification, holding it up where Thompson could see it clearly. Detective Lisa Chen, Internal Affairs Division. The change in Thompson's expression was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from his face as if someone had opened a valve. His mouth fell open and he actually took a step backward. For a moment he looked like he might faint. What did you say?" he stammered. Lisa got out of her car slowly, her badge still visible in her hand. "Detective Lisa Chen," she repeated, her voice steady and professional. "Internal Affairs. I investigate complaints against police officers." Thompson's hands started shaking. He looked around desperately as if searching for an escape route. The backup officers who had been chatting casually nearby suddenly went quiet, sensing that something major had just shifted. Officer Jenkins, who had been leaning against his patrol car, walked over with a confused look on his face. When he saw Lisa's badge, his eyes widened in recognition. "Detective Chen? What are you doing here?" "I was visiting my mother," Lisa replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And Officer Thompson here decided to pull me over for driving while black in a nice neighborhood." Jenkins looked back and forth between Lisa and Thompson, clearly trying to process what was happening. "Thompson, did you know who she was?" Thompson was practically hyperventilating. "No, she didn't. I was just doing my job. Routine traffic stop. She was acting suspicious." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious?" "I was driving the speed limit, following all traffic laws and minding my own business." What exactly was suspicious about that? By now all the backup officers had gathered around, and they were all staring at Thompson like he'd just announced he was an alien. The younger officer who'd questioned the probable cause earlier was shaking his head in disbelief. "Thompson," Jenkins said quietly, "please tell me you didn't just racially profile an internal affairs detective." Thompson opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. The magnitude of his mistake was clearly hitting him all at once. Lisa addressed the group of officers. "I want everyone to understand what just happened here. Officer Thompson followed me for several blocks, pulled me over without cause, subjected me to an aggressive search, and made several statements that clearly indicated racial bias. All of this was witnessed by civilians and recorded on their phones." She gestured toward the crowd of neighbors who were still watching from across the street. Many of them had their phones out, and Lisa could see the little red lights that indicated they were still recording. "Furthermore," Lisa continued, "Officer Thompson threatened me, saying he'd be watching me if I came back to this neighborhood. He also made several comments about people like me that clearly revealed his prejudiced attitudes." Thompson finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Detective, I didn't know. If I had known who you were—" "Stop right there," Lisa cut him off. "If you had known who I was, what? You would have treated me with respect? You would have followed proper procedures? What about all the other people you've stopped who don't have badges? Do they not deserve the same treatment?" Thompson's mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find words that didn't exist. Every officer present knew exactly what Lisa meant. If Thompson treated a detective this way, how did he treat regular citizens? Jenkins stepped forward, his face grim. "Thompson, you need to call your union rep." "Right now, why?" Thompson asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. "Because," Lisa said, pulling out her phone, "I'm filing a formal complaint against you. Racial profiling, unlawful search, intimidation, and violation of civil rights. And unlike most complaints that come through my office, this one has multiple witnesses, video evidence, and the testimony of a 15-year veteran detective." Thompson's legs seemed to give out, and he sat down heavily on the curb. His career was over, and he knew it. There was no way to explain away what had just happened. No way to claim it was a misunderstanding or a routine stop gone wrong. The younger officer who'd been uncomfortable earlier approached Lisa. "Detective, I want you to know that I questioned his actions from the beginning. I asked about probable cause, and I didn't think the search was justified." Lisa nodded at him. "I noticed that, officer." "Rodriguez," he replied. "I'm new to this precinct, but I've heard good things about the work you do in IA. Well, Officer Rodriguez, you're about to see that work in action. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what you observed here today?" Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. "Absolutely. What happened here was wrong, and I won't be part of covering it up." Thompson looked up at Rodriguez with betrayal in his eyes, but Rodriguez stared back steadily. "You did this to yourself, Thompson. We all saw it." Lisa looked around at the assembled officers. "I want to be clear about something. This isn't about me getting revenge or making Thompson's life difficult. This is about accountability. Every day, citizens file complaints about officers who abuse their power. And too often, those complaints are dismissed or inadequately investigated." She pointed toward the neighbors who were still watching. "Those people recorded everything that happened here. By tomorrow, this video will be online, and people will be asking questions about how our department handles officers like Thompson. We can either get ahead of this and show that we take misconduct seriously, or we can circle the wagons and prove that we're everything the critics say we are." Jenkins nodded grimly. "What do you need from us, Detective?" "I need honest statements from everyone who witnessed this. I need you to document exactly what you saw and heard, and I need you to remember that your integrity as officers is more important than protecting someone who doesn't deserve protection." Thompson was still sitting on the curb, his head in his hands. "My career is over," he mumbled. 15 years on the force, and it's all over." Lisa looked down at him without sympathy. "Your career should have been over years ago, based on what I'm sure I'll find when I review your complaint history. The only tragedy here is that it took this long for someone to hold you accountable." She turned to address the crowd of neighbors who were still watching. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for recording what happened here today. Your actions as witnesses are an important part of ensuring justice is served." The elderly woman, who had earlier expressed gratitude to Thompson for keeping the neighborhood safe, looked confused and embarrassed. She approached Lisa hesitantly. "I'm sorry, Officer Detective, I didn't understand what was really happening." Lisa's expression softened slightly. Ma'am, this is exactly why bias is so dangerous. You saw a black woman being detained by police and automatically assumed I must have done something wrong. I hope this experience helps you question those assumptions in the future." The woman nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "It will, I promise it will." As the crowd began to disperse, Lisa turned back to the assembled officers. "I'll be conducting formal interviews with all of you within the next few days. In the meantime, Officer Thompson will be suspended pending investigation." Thompson looked up at her with desperate eyes. "Detective, please. I have a family, kids, I'll lose everything." Lisa's voice was cold as steel. "You should have thought about that before you decided to treat people like criminals because of the color of their skin. Your family didn't make these choices. You did." She got back into her car, finally ready to drive away. As she started the engine, she caught sight of Thompson in her rearview mirror, still sitting on the curb with his head in his hands. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a grim sense of justice. Tomorrow, she would begin the formal investigation that would end Thompson's career, and hopefully send a message to other officers who thought they could abuse their power without consequences. Today had started as a peaceful visit with her mother. It was ending as the beginning of the most important case of her career. The irony wasn't lost on her. Thompson had thought he was keeping his neighborhood safe by targeting her. Instead, he just made the entire police force safer by exposing himself as the kind of officer who had no business wearing a badge. The police station felt different when Lisa walked in Monday morning. Word had already spread about what happened in Oakwood Heights, and she could feel the eyes on her as she made her way to the Internal Affairs office. Some looks were supportive, others were suspicious, and a few were openly hostile. Her partner, Detective Mike Reynolds, was waiting at her desk with 2 cups of coffee and a grim expression. "I saw the video," he said without preamble. "It's everywhere. Local news picked it up last night, and now the national outlets are calling." Lisa sat down heavily in her chair and accepted the coffee gratefully. She'd barely slept, knowing that today would be the beginning of a long and difficult process. "How bad is it?" Mike pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. The video had over 2 million views already, and the comments section was exactly what she'd expected. People were outraged, demanding justice, calling for Thompson's firing and criminal charges. "The chief wants to see you," Mike said. "Like immediately." Lisa nodded, having expected as much. She'd left a voicemail for Chief Martinez late Sunday night, giving him a heads up about what was coming. By now, he'd probably been fielded dozens of calls from reporters, politicians, and community leaders. Chief Martinez's office was on the top floor, and Lisa could see the entire city from his windows. He was a good man, someone who'd worked his way up through the ranks and genuinely cared about improving police-community relations. But he was also a practical politician who understood that this situation could explode into something much bigger if it wasn't handled properly. "Lisa," he said, standing up from his desk as she entered. I'm sorry this happened to you. And I'm sorry we have officers on this force who think it's acceptable to behave that way." Lisa was touched by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you, Chief, but this isn't about me. This is about the dozens of other people who filed similar complaints that we haven't taken seriously enough." Chief Martinez nodded grimly. "I've already started pulling Thompson's file. 23 complaints in 15 years, including 6 allegations of racial profiling. Most were dismissed as unsubstantiated." Lisa felt her anger flare. 23 complaints? And he was still on patrol? The union fought every single one. Said there wasn't enough evidence, claimed the complainants were unreliable or had motives to lie. The chief rubbed his temples. "I'm not making excuses, Lisa. I'm just explaining how we got here. What's Thompson's status now? Suspended without pay, effective immediately. I've also ordered a comprehensive review of all his cases from the past 5 years. If we find a pattern of misconduct, we'll refer everything to the DA's office for possible criminal charges." Lisa was impressed. Chief Martinez was taking this seriously, which wasn't always the case when officers were accused of misconduct. "What about the other officers who were present?" "They've all been interviewed separately. Officer Rodriguez's statement supports everything you've said. So does Officer Jenkins, though he admits he should have intervened more forcefully. The other 2 are claiming they just followed Thompson's lead and didn't realize what was happening." Lisa snorted. "Didn't realize? They were right there. They heard every word he said, I know. And their statements reflect that. They're facing disciplinary action for failure to intervene." The chief leaned back in his chair. Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately? You could have ended this whole thing before it started. Lisa had been expecting this question, and she'd thought carefully about her answer. Because I wanted to see how far he would go, Chief. Every month we get complaints just like this. People saying they were stopped for no reason, searched without cause, treated like criminals because of their race. And every month we struggle to prove those allegations because it's usually the complainant's word against the officers. She leaned forward in her chair. This time we have video evidence. We have multiple witnesses. We have an officer's own words captured on camera, showing exactly the kind of bias that we usually can't prove. Thompson handed us a textbook case of racial profiling. Chief Martinez was quiet for a long moment. You used yourself as bait. I documented a pattern of behavior that I suspected was happening but could never prove. Now we can prove it. And if things had gone wrong, if Thompson had escalated to violence? Lisa shrugged. I'm a trained police officer carrying a legal weapon. I could have protected myself. But Chief, the real question is, what about all the people who can't protect themselves? What about the citizens who don't have badges to hide behind? Before the chief could respond, his secretary knocked on the door. Sir? The mayor's office is on line 1. They want to schedule a press conference. Chief Martinez sighed. Tell them I'll call back in an hour. He looked at Lisa. This is going to get very public very quickly. Are you prepared for that? Lisa nodded. I've been thinking about it all night. I want to do the press conference. I want to explain what happened and why it matters. The union won't like that. They'll say you're trying to destroy Thompson's reputation before he's had a fair hearing. His reputation was destroyed the moment he decided to treat me like a criminal because of my skin color. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. The chief's phone rang again and he glanced at the caller ID. That's the FBI, he said with surprise. They must be calling about possible federal civil rights violations. Lisa felt a grim satisfaction. The federal government took civil rights violations seriously, and if the FBI was already interested, it meant Thompson's problems were just beginning. As Chief Martinez took the call, Lisa's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her mother. Saw the news, honey. Are you okay? I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right. More messages followed. Fellow officers expressing support, friends checking on her, and even a few messages from strangers who'd seen the video and wanted to thank her for speaking out. But there were negative messages too. Anonymous calls to her desk phone, threatening emails and social media posts questioning her motives. Some people were suggesting she'd set Thompson up, that she'd deliberately provoked the confrontation to make him look bad. Lisa deleted the threatening messages and ignored the social media posts. She'd expected this kind of backlash. Whenever police misconduct was exposed, there were always people who preferred to attack the messenger rather than address the message. Detective Reynolds knocked on the chief's door. Lisa, there's someone here to see you. Says she was one of the witnesses yesterday. Lisa followed Mike back to her desk where a middle-aged black woman was waiting nervously. She introduced herself as Patricia Johnson, and she lived on the street where the incident had occurred. Detective, I wanted to thank you, Patricia said. I recorded the whole thing on my phone and I've already given a copy to 3 different news stations. What that officer did to you was disgusting. Thank you for being a witness, Lisa replied. Your recording will be crucial evidence. Patricia leaned closer, lowering her voice. Detective, that officer has done this before. My teenage son was stopped by him last year for looking suspicious while walking home from school. We filed a complaint, but nothing happened. Lisa felt her jaw tighten. Would you be willing to file a new complaint? With everything that's happening now, previous incidents are going to be taken much more seriously. Yes, Patricia said without hesitation. And I know at least 3 other families who've had similar experiences with him. We were all too scared to speak up before, but after seeing what happened to you, Lisa exchanged glances with Mike. If multiple families came forward with similar stories, it would establish the pattern of behavior they needed to make federal charges stick. Mrs. Johnson, would you be willing to meet with me later this week? I'd like to get formal statements from you and the other families. Of course. Detective, I hope you know that what you're doing is important. A lot of people in our community have lost faith in the police, but seeing an officer stand up for what's right, it gives us hope. After Patricia left, Lisa sat back in her chair. feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This was bigger than just Thompson now. It was about rebuilding trust between the police and the community they served. Her phone rang, and she recognized the number as one of the local TV stations. "Detective Chen? This is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about what happened yesterday." Lisa looked at Mike, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll do the interview," she said. "But I want to make something clear. This isn't about me getting revenge on Officer Thompson. This is about accountability and ensuring that all citizens are treated with dignity and respect." As she hung up the phone, Lisa realized that her life had changed forever. Yesterday, she'd been an internal affairs detective working behind the scenes. Today, she was the public face of police accountability. But if her experience could help other victims of police misconduct get justice, if it could make other officers think twice before letting their prejudices guide their actions, then it would all be worth it. Thompson's reckoning was just beginning, but so was her opportunity to make real change. 6 months after that Sunday afternoon in Oakwood Heights, Lisa stood in the same courtroom where she'd testified countless times as a detective. But today was different. Today she was watching former Officer Brad Thompson learn his fate. The federal trial had been swift and decisive. With video evidence, multiple witness testimonies, and Thompson's own recorded words, the case was almost impossible to defend. His lawyer had tried to argue that Thompson's actions were within the bounds of normal police procedure, but the jury hadn't bought it. Judge Patricia Williams read the verdict with a steady voice. "On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy against rights, we find the defendant guilty." Thompson's shoulders sagged as the words hit him. His wife, sitting in the front row, began crying quietly. Lisa felt no joy in watching his world crumble, only a sense that justice was finally being served. The judge continued, "Mr. Thompson, your actions on that day were not just a violation of Detective Chen's civil rights. They were a betrayal of the oath you took to protect and serve all citizens equally. Your conduct brought shame upon the badge and eroded public trust in law enforcement." Thompson was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and permanently barred from working in law enforcement. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he caught Lisa's eye for just a moment. She saw no remorse there, only anger and self-pity. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Lisa, asking for her reaction to the verdict. She'd gotten used to the media attention over the past months, though she still preferred her old life of working behind the scenes. "Justice was served today," she said simply. But this case was never just about Officer Thompson. It was about accountability and the need for law enforcement to police itself. A reporter pushed closer with her microphone. "Detective Chen, some people are saying that you entrapped Thompson, that you deliberately provoked this confrontation. How do you respond to those critics?" Lisa had heard this accusation many times, and her answer was always the same. "I was driving legally through a public neighborhood, visiting my elderly mother. If that's considered provocative behavior, then we have much bigger problems than one bad officer." After the press conference, Lisa drove back to the police station where significant changes had taken place over the past 6 months. Chief Martinez had used Thompson's case as a catalyst for department-wide reforms. All officers now underwent mandatory bias training every 6 months. Body cameras were required for all traffic stops, and most importantly, a new policy required any officer who witnessed misconduct to report it immediately or face disciplinary action. Lisa's partner Mike was waiting for her with a stack of files. "How'd it go?" he asked. 3 years federal prison, permanent ban from law enforcement." Mike nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Maybe it'll send a message to others." The message was already being received. Since Thompson's arrest, complaints of racial profiling had decreased significantly in their district. Whether that was because officers were behaving better or because people felt more confident that their complaints would be taken seriously, Lisa wasn't sure. "Probably both. Any word on the other cases?" Lisa asked. Mike pulled out a thick folder. "Patricia Johnson and 6 other families have filed federal lawsuits based on Thompson's past behavior. The city's already settled 3 of them out of court." Lisa felt a surge of pride. Patricia Johnson had become a community advocate, helping other families come forward with their stories of police misconduct. Her courage in speaking out had given others the strength to do the same. "There's something else," Mike said, his tone becoming more serious. "The chief wants to see you." Something about a new assignment. Lisa made her way to Chief Martinez's office, wondering what he had in mind. Over the past months, she'd become the unofficial face of the department's reform efforts, speaking at community meetings and training sessions. "Lisa, come in," the chief said warmly. "I have a proposition for you." She sat down across from his desk, curious about what was coming next. "The mayor's office has approved funding for a new position, community police liaison. It would involve working directly with neighborhood groups, handling complaints before they become formal investigations, and training officers on bias prevention." Lisa considered the offer. It sounded like important work, but it also meant leaving internal affairs behind. "What about my current caseload? Mike can handle most of it, and we're hiring 2 new IA detectives. Lisa, what happened to you has changed this department in ways we're still discovering. I think you could do more good in this new role than anywhere else." She thought about all the families who'd reached out to her over the past months, people who'd been afraid to speak up about police misconduct until they saw that change was possible. Maybe this new position would give her a chance to prevent those situations from happening in the first place. "I'll take it," she said. 3 weeks later, Lisa was standing in front of a packed community center in the neighborhood where she'd grown up. The audience was diverse, reflecting the changing demographics of the city. Some faces were suspicious, others hopeful, but all were attentive. "My name is Detective Lisa Chen," she began, "and 6 months ago, I was racially profiled and illegally searched by a police officer while visiting my mother." The room buzzed with recognition. Most people had seen the video or heard about the case. I could have pulled out my badge immediately and ended the confrontation, but I didn't, because I wanted to experience what countless other people have experienced when they encounter biased officers. I wanted to understand what it feels like to be treated like a criminal for no reason other than the color of your skin. She paused, looking around the room. "What I learned that day was that having a badge doesn't protect you from prejudice. Being a police officer doesn't exempt you from being a victim of police misconduct. And that experience has made me a better officer and a better person." An elderly man in the front row raised his hand. "Detective, how do we know this isn't just for show? How do we know things will really change?" Lisa nodded, having expected this question. "You don't know, and you shouldn't take my word for it. You should judge us by our actions, not our promises. Hold us accountable every single day." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing statistics from the past 6 months. Traffic stops in minority neighborhoods are down 30%. Use of force incidents are down 25%. Citizen complaints are up 40%, which might sound bad, but actually means people feel more comfortable coming forward. A young woman near the back spoke up. "What about officers who retaliate against people who file complaints?" "Zero tolerance," Lisa replied firmly. "We've already disciplined 3 officers for retaliation, and 1 has been terminated. The message is clear. If you try to punish someone for speaking out about misconduct, your career is over." The meeting lasted for 2 hours, with Lisa answering questions and listening to concerns. Some people were skeptical, and she didn't blame them. Trust once broken took time to rebuild. Afterward, Patricia Johnson approached her. "Detective, I wanted you to know that my son isn't afraid to walk through his own neighborhood anymore. That's because of what you did." Lisa felt tears threatening to form. "No, Mrs. Johnson, that's because of what you did. You spoke up when it mattered." As Lisa drove home that night, she passed through Oakwood Heights, the neighborhood where everything had started. The streets looked the same, but she felt different driving through them now. She wasn't just another black woman who might be viewed with suspicion. She was Detective Lisa Chen, Community Police Liaison, working to make sure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone else. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Saw you on the news tonight, sweetheart. Your father would be so proud." Lisa smiled, thinking about her father, who'd been a civil rights lawyer before his death 10 years earlier. He'd always told her that real change happened one person, one case, one moment of courage at a time. She'd started that Sunday afternoon as a victim of police misconduct. She'd become something much more powerful, an agent of change. And while there was still work to be done, still officers to train and communities to heal, she knew that the department would never be the same. Thompson was in federal prison, his career and reputation destroyed by his own actions. But more importantly, his downfall had created an opportunity for real reform. New policies were in place, new training was mandatory, and new accountability measures ensured that officers who abused their power would face consequences. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in years, Lisa felt optimistic about the future of policing in her city. Change was possible, justice could be served, and sometimes karma really did hit hard. As she pulled into her driveway, Lisa thought about all the people who'd been victims of police misconduct over the years. People who'd filed complaints that were dismissed or ignored. Their voices had finally been heard, and their experiences had finally mattered. It had taken a federal case, national media attention, and 6 months of hard work to get here. But they'd done it. They'd proven that accountability was possible, that change could happen, and that sometimes the person you least expect to make a difference is exactly the person who can change everything. Thompson's moment of prejudice had lasted less than an hour. Its consequences would reshape the department for years to come.